just put head count, because we have a limit of 49. So we're making sure we don't affect fire code here. And also please make sure that we're not taking up like 3 chairs each if we can, and you can possibly squeeze in and let people squeeze in. That'll be great. We're waiting for one board member who's on her way. We can start with that. That's right. So
We'll make a note in the public record when she.
yes, we'll make a note when Adrian try and remember. All right, I'd like to call to order the Planning Board Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for Flemington Borough of Tuesday, November 26th, 2024. Please rise as you are able to the flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. This meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. Both adequate and electronic notice of this meeting has been provided by way of publication in the Hunterdon County Democrat and Courier News newspapers on or about February the 1st, 2024 and January 30th, 2024. In addition, notice of the meeting was posted at the Borough of Flemington Municipal Building located at 38 Park Avenue and any handicapped accessible entrances thereto. Posted on the municipal website, provided to the municipal clerk, and distributed to all persons, if any, requesting copies of the same. This meeting is being recorded with both audio and video and may be rebroadcast. This meeting is a judicial proceeding, and any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. We do have like rules of meetings when we have a lot of public, and we'll come to those when it gets to each thing that I think you want to be involved in. We'll just go over those again. All right, thanks. Some chairs right at the front, so if you get late, you got to come to the front row. Sorry, that's the way it goes. All right, Alan, could we hold the roll, please?
Mayor Carroll,
Here.
Councilwoman Fasaro,
Here.
Mr. Campion is excused, Ms. Giffen,
Here.
Mr. Hill may,
You might be in a late.
might be a little late. Mr. Dasha,
Here.
Mr. Cook,
Here.
Ms. Weitzman,
Here.
Mr. Semino is excused. Ms. Swingle,
Here.
Mr. Eckel,
Here.
Mr. Show. Ms. Kaczynski. Here. Mr. Clerico.
Here.
Ms. McManus. Here. Mr. Chapman.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The nice full house. Before we get into the agenda proper, I actually need to ask my board for somebody to have a motion and a second to change the agenda slightly. Based for item 9, which is the ordinance consistency review that was on our agenda and is now not needed. Because the council chose to table it last night. It was chosen to be tabled to take a pause.
So let's make a motion to amend the agenda to bring that up as item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
I second.
Thank you. And I just want to make a statement about why we're doing
Just say
that.
all in favor.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Anyone opposed?
All in favor? Anybody opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to let people know a little bit more detail why, for transparency, it was tabled at council yesterday. We held the subcommittee, tasked with by the council with creating and working on that ordinance change, held many meetings with the FCP, landlords, council members over the last month or so. And in listening to comments that were made by many people in that in those meetings, it's felt to be best to take a pause in the process of working on that ordinance to ostensibly a lack of data was mentioned regularly, particularly by the FCP, that they wanted more data on the buildings, and unfortunately
they weren't able to produce that data for us to be able to move forward. So in order that they can create that data and input that into the process, we're going to have to take a pause, and also because then we're coming up to reorg at the end of the year, we get new members, we don't know who's coming onto the board, etc. We'll then reconvene the subcommittee to move forward at that point. So it'll be January at the 1st, and that gives the FCP 2 months to collect that data together for us. I will be sending an email to that effect to the FCP chair and the council rep for FCP that is current, and our council rep, so that they're aware that that's the intention of this subcommittee of this planning board going forward. It's a little unfortunate because there was a lot of really good work, and I thank both the subcommittee and Beth McManus for all their hard work on that ordinance, creating some good work with the definitions and the SIC codes change to assist our zoning and construction officials to help Main Street businesses be able to receive permits as we would like to see them receive permits. So, but like I say, it's on pause. It's not closed completely. It's not finished. We're going to revisit it, and we're going to come together with everyone had a shared vision, as did this board, of the way forward. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to iron out those things in the new year. So I appreciate your indulgence to explain that to you. So right now then we'll move on to item 1 on our agenda. Now, this is where I'll need to explain something. Item 1 on our agenda says public comments. And but it's very specific, and normally we have to it's time for public comment for things that aren't currently on the agenda. Okay, so it doesn't mean we're silencing you. It's just that if it's on the agenda, there will be time for public comment in that part of the agenda. Does that make sense to everybody? But if anybody has a public comment they would like to make for something not currently on the agenda, please feel free right now to come say. Okay, do you want to come forward so that if you do make a comment, we need your name and address for the record, and then you can speak into the mic. So that
Could we also turn on the public view? I think that one camera might still be off.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
You've got to get your face on the camera first.
My name is Lois Stewart, and I'm a resident of the borough of Flemington.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask about what's going on at 44 Emory Avenue. Did that new occupant come before this board for permission? Or I just heard that there is something going in at the end of my street, and I was a little concerned because no one on my street seems to know anything about it.
Are you talking about in the industrial complex?
No, at the end, 44, just before you get to the highway.
On the left.
What do you think? I mean, nothing's come before us, but we only get certain items that come before us. Certainly, I don't know if something has come before construction.
Well,
or-
it's past the driveway that goes into the old rubber mill. It's on the opposite side of the street, all the way down by the highway.
That's where township.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a township.
Yeah, it's a township.
But that is where,
That's where
It's on the
township.
other side of the line, yeah.
sorry.
Wrong
that's
meeting,
right.
sorry, Lauren.
Does anybody know what's happening there?
No.
They're having some open house in December, but I don't know open house for what, I can't seem to find it.
I think that was Susan Rice. Had her eye doctor
Yes.
thing there.
It's where
Yes.
township.
I don't know what's
Guys,
going on.
guys,
That
guys,
was
guys,
just-
yeah, it has, there has little discussions, we're gonna talk, we need names.
Thank you for-
I'm not gonna go.
We'll get Lois, we'll get.
But I'm
Lois
just trying to
listening.
explain it, okay?
Yeah.
I understand, we just, it's really for the record, we're required by law to have a very specific record, we need to know who everybody is. It's not my rules.
All right, do we have any public comments in the room or anybody online? I mean, I don't have the list of the attendees. Is there anybody online? Oh, so
there
somebody in
are.
the-
709, I did not see any hands being raised.
oh, someone. Oh, yeah, it's already there.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm not, can I come up?
Yes, please. Oh, thank you. Sorry, what did you say? Yes, please, please.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I'd asked.
Are you taking public comments on agenda items at this point?
No,
No, okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. I'll wait.
we will, there will definitely be space for that, Linda.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
I don't see anybody online raising a hand.
I see no hands raised on the attendance online.
Right, so good, let's move on. Okay, item 2, comments, please.
So last night, the Borough Council introduced, an ordinance change to our, really well, you can't hear me? Okay. Last night, the Borough Council introduced an ordinance that emanated from our parking subcommittee that I formed this year. To look at traffic, issues and parking issues throughout the borough. These three it's one ordinance, but it's 3 new, always stops that are gonna be going in, the public hearings December 9th. So there'll be a new always stop has been proposed for Broad and Bloomfield Avenue to slow down the speeding. Significantly, Mine Street, which has the most speeding in the town, God bless. Also the most tickets given by our police department and significantly none from Flemington Borough. We are putting in an always stop at Mine and Park Avenue. You look happy. Mine and Stengel. And we will be looking for grant funding to put in some flashing crossing lights and improve crosswalks at Mine and Central, Mine and Academy, and Mine at Walnut Brook for people wanting to get over to Devore or to the Catholic Church for next year. So we're looking for some grant funding to do that. I want to thank Jay Troutman for doing that work and giving us a great report. Just so there's so many people from the public here, the other things that the parking committee has tackled. We're responsible for that 4-way stop at Williams and Broad. Jay has been working on retiming the Ferran Boulevard and North Main Street light to allow better flow of traffic across Ferran Boulevard to Park Avenue and the left turn onto Main Street from Ferran Boulevard. We've also sent a letter from me to the DOT asking them to retime the traffic light on Route 31 to allow more cars to make a left turn onto Church Street. To get out of town. We are currently looking at changing parking in this town to resident only overnight with permits for you and your visitors and your family and be able to buy more permits, but we're having a significant issue with overnight parking in residential tiny little neighborhoods from the apartments along Main Street. So we're looking at that. Jay is also going to be coming to the council in January, I hope, to present a new parking plan. I'm sorry, not parking plan, driving plan around the Union Hotel project to ensure that the residents of the apartments and the hotel users do not flow out into the residential neighborhoods as was promised during all of the hearings at the planning board and the council. Jay has designed a plan that would keep the traffic flowing mostly to Main Street or further down on Broad. So he'll be presenting that to the council in hope that they do an ordinance change on those streets sometime probably in January. So that's, I don't think I missed anything.
That was a good summary, Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a very productive committee, I have to say. I'm personally really pleased with the work it's done. I think it's making this town safer for the residents and safer for pedestrians especially.
And I think the speed at which it's been able to respond to people's
Yeah, we've been
concerns
pretty
came
fast.
up really quick.
We've been really fast. We've been really fast and I'm really happy about that. So thank you. That's it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. All right, item 3, council comments.
Actually, yeah. Let me move this forward. I should have get close to you. I'm a little sick, guys. So I've been a part of both the parking. Technical stuff here. So I've been a part of the parking committee, or what we call the traffic committee, along with the mayor and other members of our professionals, other members of the community, and it has been a really wonderful way to reach out and literally touch our residents' businesses. How do we navigate our community? And we are always looking for insight, feedback, understanding of what the folks in our community are experiencing. So I would really reach out to myself, to the mayor, Susan, Councilwoman Engelhardt, we can help if necessary. Next thing, do want to thank Beth McManus and Karen for pulling together a subcommittee on zoning. It was, the work that you put in Beth was amazing. It was wonderful, a wonderful opportunity to try to understand what the vision of our current master plan is and the vision of the community. And I will say this, I'm disappointed that we have this really robust master plan with a vision of what Flemington should look like and how we should live in it and what our daily life experience should be. And unfortunately, we could not get there. So I do look forward to seeing the information from our FCP director, so we can truly understand what the gaps are and how we can fill those gaps in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 4 is HPC comments. Dennis, you have something for us, please?
Yes, we had a meeting last week. We approved the porch roof at 13 New York Avenue. Eileen forwarded that to the board. And then the only other item, we are planning for the 2025 Historic House Tour. It's planned for Saturday, June 21st from 11 to 5. Looking for additional houses and volunteers. So if anyone's interested, let me know. That's it for me.
Well, calendars now, very popular, very busy event, wonderful event for the town, thank you. Dennis, all right, item 5, professional reports. Do any of our professionals have anything that isn't currently on the agenda and can be dealt with that way? Do we need to talk about anything else right now? Okay, thank you. Item 6 is approval of the minutes from November 19th, 2024 regular meeting. Those were distributed by Eileen. Has anybody got any comments, amendments, changes that need to be made to those before we vote on them?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Second. All right, can we take the roll call, please?
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Mayor Carroll?
Yes.
Councilwoman Fasaro?
Yes.
Ms. Giffen?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Ms. Weitzman?
Yes.
Ms. Swingle?
Yes.
Mr. Echo?
Yes.
Mr. Cho?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, items 7 and 8, can I want them together, resolutions? Do we have those?
You don't, I didn't realize when I made my comment at the last meeting that we had only a week in between, so we'll have them for the 10th.
We usually have 2 weeks between meetings, we only had 1, so, okay. we'll
I'll
take-
also have Eileen, the Chick-fil-A resolution. for the
Can you
10th.
please use a microphone?
Sure, sorry, Lois.
Maybe we can add one of the ones from here down.
These are short.
It's all right. I won't talk that
That was
much.
sharing, yeah.
So we'll add the Chick-fil-A one to that as well.
Did you get that? We'll have 3 resolutions next time, the 2 on the agenda and 1 for Chick-fil-A.
The pool's not gonna be heard tonight either.
That's a resolution, the pools, that was, we heard that last meeting, and that's a resolution that received a vote last meeting. National pools. The re- No. So we'll table those, or put those to next week, next meeting, it's not next week, we've actually got a few weeks. These November ones throw me right off of our usual way of in.
Next meeting.
We'll have it again next
Well,
month.
December 10th.
Then again, the 17th, we're one after the other next month.
We are again with 10th and 17th, so yeah, we've got a week after each.
So what's gonna be on 12/10?
We'll have 2 resolutions. I'll do it at the end as well. We usually capture this at the end, but we'll have the resolutions that were mentioned, 3 resolutions. And we also have the completeness and public hearing altogether for the Huntington Tea House on that meeting too.
She was not using the microphone at the beginning.
Right, that's why I said it on here for you. So the 2 resolutions, items 7 and 8, will be at the next meeting. As will, there's a resolution for Chick-fil-A came for an amendment of the canopy. Thank you for the word.
Canopy.
Canopy, it was a quick one, just to change, they actually reduced the size of the canopy and they came and formalized that. that will be at the next meeting also, to memorialize that. Okay, so, okay, we are flipping through these numbers, I love it. Okay, so item 9, we already, voted to amend that, it's, the new item 9 is the public hearing for Huntsman County Democratic Committee application 2024-08, 111 Main Street, continued from October 22nd, 24. This is an appeal of a decision of an administrative officer, namely a zoning officer. Right?
Good evening, everyone.
You don't need to.
It should be on.
You just might wanna have to, you might have to speak close to the microphone.
Yeah. No problem. I just wanna set up a little bit and just.
Take your time.
Uh,
Take your time, but if you can state your name and some.
My name is Tom Jardine.
I'm sorry.
Oh, recusal, sorry. While you're getting set in.
Yeah, I'm not the treasurer.
Oh, you are not the treasurer.
I'm not involved with HDC in any official capacity.
Alright, so one of the things.
Let Tara make their official statement.
Yeah, so as we typically do before applications, is there anyone that feels that they have any fiduciary, pecuniary, or other financial interest in this application, or any other reason why they feel that they could not participate in an unbiased manner?
We're all coming together, the committee.
So you're gonna be recusing yourself. Thank you. Anybody else?
No, and I don't see any of our members online saying anything either. All right. You ready, sir?
Yes,
We're ready for you.
everybody. My name is Tom Jardine.
Oh, will you need to be sharing?
There was somebody he needs.
Oh, we need to see your beautiful face. We need to promote.
Allow me to.
Just 1 second for the technology.
And while you're doing that, we can just.
It should be a,
Yeah.
request that.
Any chance I could put my mouse on so I don't have to use.
And then just make sure you like the view
Just turn
yourself.
on the camera, but leave off the microphone.
And while you're doing that, Eileen, all of the notices and publication proofs are in order, so the board has jurisdiction to act on this matter.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Did you want to, enter any?
I'll do that. I'll let him start, and then we'll mark the exhibits.
Thank you.
So Mike, the camera.
You need to turn the camera on, but don't leave the mic alone because the audio is coming through the other mic. There you go.
Piece of cake.
As long as you like the view of your face, that's all.
I
good.
know, I want to see, thank you.
Well, it's being recorded, so smile.
I have to look good. I know everybody's here for this application tonight. So I'm
Absolutely.
sure they hear me. As I was saying, my name is Tom Jardine. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Jardine, Meisner, Salmon, Sprague, and Susser, representing the Hunterdon County Democratic Committee. I do have one short witness this evening, Frank Banish, who will be testifying very briefly. This is, as you know, an appeal of the zoning officer determination regarding a use that the proposed office use is not permitted in the DB zone. We're not seeking any variance relief tonight. It's just simply an appeal under the MLUL of the zoning officer's determination. When you have those kinds of appeals of a determination, it's about as close to legal argument as you can get in a zoning or a planning board hearing. So I'm going to go through, usually I would just hand it over to the planner or hand it over to the engineer, but I'm going to go through a couple issues and maybe probably going to be arguing to the board attorney while I do that.
Okay, before we start,
Yeah.
now that he's made his introduction, we'll mark as exhibit A1, the application and supporting documentation. A2 will be the proofs of notice and publication, and PB1 will be the board planner's memo dated November 6, 2024.
I'm going to show things. I just go to this PC and I stuff my thumb drive in and that should show up
Yes.
somewhere.
Yeah, it should recognize the thumb drive and you should be able to, whatever files, just double click on them, open them. And
Under this PC. or under-
can you, down below, you should be able to share.
Oh, just share,
Screen.
okay, well, that's easier, yeah. Yeah, but I have to do the full up, so.
Right.
On the desktop. Sorry, where would it be?
If you go to
Yeah,
the
you-
file folder and the yellow
You
folder
might want
on
to
the
show
bottom.
me.
Down on the bottom, do
So
you have
not
a file
that.
folder?
You didn't bring your 5-year-old.
Yeah, I know. I could've-
Down here.
Aha.
And then. Should be.
She's right.
Should be ready.
Fine. Aha.
So if you double click on any of these.
Yeah, yeah.
they will-
Perfect.
And then you can share.
All right, anyway, I will be relatively brief. There's a truism when it comes to permitted uses under the municipal land use law. That if the use is not expressly permitted, it's prohibited, right? And so in fact, many towns will adopt an ordinance that expressly says that. And so Flemington has indeed done that. Under section 2603 of your zoning code or of your land use law, it says prohibited uses. All principal, accessory, and conditional uses not expressly permitted in this ordinance are hereby prohibited. So as it turns out, in practice, that's quite tricky when it comes to office uses. Because there are so many of them, there could be dozens or even hundreds of different types of uses that could be characterized as an office use. So your ordinance has a general definition of the term office, and that's found in section 1201, where it defines office as a building or portion thereof used as the place of business as a person, corporation, firm, or public agency for professional and or administrative services. If I hear anybody sleeping, that means be upset. And then it says, this use shall exclude medical offices. This use shall include, but shall not be limited to, corporate offices, law firms, accounting firms, insurance firms, and real estate firms. Now, I said that it excluded medical offices. You have a separate definition for defined as office/medical. And while that doesn't apply here, it is to be noted that that's the only other definition of an office in your definition section in your ordinance. I suspect that's because medical office tends to generate a lot of traffic, and you want to make sure that you're capturing, you know, whether it's a dentist or doctor, that there's a specific definition for that. But as I know that you all know, because I watched a couple of your meetings, especially your September 10th meeting, your ordinance does something else too. It defines specific type of uses by their SIC code, right? That's the standard industrial code. And the only problem with that, at least from my perspective, is that SIC codes are generally not as specific in their definitions as your code would be, or any other of the 563 municipal land use codes would be in the state of New Jersey, when it specifically defines a term. So for example, in the DB district, which is what we're talking about here, and in other districts where the SIC code is used, you have, for example, a section that defines advertising, credit reporting, reproduction, computer programming, data processing, building services, and similar business services. So that's like almost a no-no when it comes to municipal land use law. You never say like, but for, in addition and including, or including in addition to, you tend not to want to say similar business services because that opens the door very wide. You want to be very specific as to what is permitted, and everything that is not permitted is prohibited. But likewise, in that same DB section, you have engineering, surveying, architectural, accounting, auditing, bookkeeping, research and development, management, public relations, and again, and similar services. And that's defined as SIC code 87. And the point I'm trying to make is that and similar services opens the door pretty widely to interpretation. And I know that, Mayor, I heard from you at the September 10th meeting that you're looking to change that as a counselor. Somebody mentioned that. That's probably not a bad idea from a planning perspective. But it definitely calls into the question the notion that you have in section 2603 of your ordinance, that all uses not expressly permitted in the ordinance are prohibited, because you've left open the door, because you've said, and similar services. So you're opening up the door to other uses. Those two things are pretty much in conflict, and I know there was some discussion at the last meeting about maybe addressing that, and I wish you luck on that. But there is good news, Mayor and board members, and that is this. If you can find a use in this town that is the exact same use as the proposed use in this application, and see how that's been treated in the past, then you have the answer. You have the answer as to whether or not this proposed use is prohibited or not. And that's exactly what we've done. So I do want to, if I can click on this, I'm moving on, show you. Let's see, here's your zoning map.
You need to share on
And then-
Zoom first, just without seeing your laptop.
Should be on the bottom of the Zoom.
Big green button to share at the bottom of the screen. So right now we're seeing your thumb drive.
That's okay. All right, so here's your zoning ordinance. We don't need to spend, I mean, your zoning map.
You're not
If you
sharing
double click on
that.
You gotta share the whole screen. Or maybe
Hold on, I'll go back.
you need to close the file. Just close the, go to here, and then we have to close this. Minimize it. But it
No, I mean, my meeting's at 10:30.
I'd rather not.
All right, so here's your.
You might just have to read it.
Oh,
Hey.
Beautiful.
And guess what? We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but we are dealing with the DB zone, and that's this area in red here.
Mhm.
Do you want to mark this?
I don't personally need to mark this. It's your zoning map. It
Well,
should
let's
be-
do that just so
Okay.
we have a reference, so
Sure.
we'll mark as. So whenever we make a reference to this, we'll mark it as A3.
Okay.
And it's a copy of the borough zoning map, and is there a date on the one that you're presenting, just to make sure we've got the most current one?
Yeah, it's out of date. It's,
June 2013. From your website. And. Stop sharing for a second. Show you. Sorry. It's the same, map. Same exact document, but I have marked it up, and we could mark this.
Alright, so we'll do A4, same zoning map, same date.
Microphone.
A4, same zoning map, not in color. June 2013 with commentary or comments or references, annotations that you're going to spell out for the record.
Like, minimize. I don't know, something going on correctly. What you have though in this map, if I can pull it up correctly, is you have another identical use to that. And that identical use is in the, the Highway Retail District. And in the Highway Retail District, you have the Hunterdon County Republican Committee offices. Obviously, the exact same uses. Okay. So I do want to, maybe I can hand this out, maybe that would be easier, and we could mark this as 3.
Okay, and just so the record's clear, the purpose of A4 was to show.
Well, the purpose
What?
of A4 was to show that the exact same use is, as the proposed use is in the Highway Retail District. Unfortunately, the map seems a little cut off, and that's probably related to my technology skills, but it doesn't really matter from my perspective.
Okay.
But I will, hand this out if that's okay.
Be A5, is it the same as? No, so this will be A5. If you can just describe that for the record.
So A4 is a document.
A5,
A5, I'm sorry, is a document that shows, now each of these zones, the DB zone and the HR zone have, many permitted, expressly permitted uses. The ones that I want the board to focus on are these 5. And because these are the uses under which the proposed use is permitted. And that's because in the Highway Retail District, the Hunterdon County Republican Committee has offices, and their offices were approved by your zoning officer by one of these categories. Now there, as I said, there's others, there's I think 39 total, but he or she used one of these categories to approve the use of the Hunterdon County Republican Committee. And as it turns out, the Downtown Business District has those exact same categories, right? So obviously you wouldn't treat these identical uses, and we would have to, I think, acknowledge that they're identical uses differently simply because the only difference between the two of them is that, you know, one's the Hunterdon County Republican Committee and the other one is the Hunterdon County Democratic Committee. That would be like crazy, if you don't mind me using a legal term, but it would surely get you sued, I can tell you that. And you would surely lose. There's no distinction between those two uses whatsoever. So that's the only point I wanted to make so that you understand that the uses are identical and that we've already permitted that use in the Highway Retail District. And you had to have permitted that use under one of those 5 categories, and again, those 5 categories include the language and similar business services, I would suggest that your zoning officer, permitted that use under category number 34, which is engineering, surveying, architectural accounting, auditing, bookkeeping, research and development, management, public relations, and similar services. I'm suggesting that because that's what my witness is going to testify as to what the proposed use is going to be. I do want to make another thing clear, just so you all have an understanding. I know that you have a goal in your 2022 master plan, which is a beautiful document that I did read. And like most towns, the goal is not to put it on the shelf, but to actually put it into action. I do know that in your master plan on page 36, you talk about the downtown business district. And you make clear that the district standards should be amended to allow first floor residential uses as a conditional use. And then you also say, additionally, uses that are not active, such as offices that disrupt first floor commercial activity, should be converted to conditional uses. And that is a fine policy goal on behalf of the Planning and Zoning Board and the governing body. However, that has not been adopted by the governing body as the rules of the road for the town yet. And so that's a nice precatory, or as I say, wishful thinking, and I, if you put it into place, that's great. That's not the law of the land right now. The law of the land is that office is allowed on the first floor, and clearly the DB district doesn't say anything differently from that. And then I do want to say, with respect to the subject property, and Mr. Banish is going to testify on this a little bit, known as the Hawk House. It has, and Mayor, actually on the September 10th meeting that I listened to, you had said this specifically. You said the Hawk House has always been used as office space, and so the use is not changing at all. And you even used it as an example of where the first floor office has been allowed and should be allowed. You said on the meeting of September 10th. And so obviously, I don't know if you change your position, everybody's allowed to change your position. But as you'll hear from our witness, office use has been existing on the first floor and at this site for at least the last 16 years. And the uses in terms of what's permitted in the Highway Retail District and the Hunterdon County Republican Committee are exactly identical. And finally, just before we get to Mr. Banish, Mr. Rinaldi, who I understand is the zoning officer, when he framed or discussed with my law partner the proposed use of this space, he framed the proposed use as, quote, political. And I don't want to
Is
talk
this
about.
documentation or is this testimony on what Pat Rinaldi had said?
It's what Mr. Rinaldi.
Is there a document showing exactly his
If
statements?
you look at the zoning determinant.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Well, I want to make sure now that you say that, but in any event, I'm not to belabor the point, but obviously you can't zone based upon political, right? This town allows political signage all throughout the town, and that's okay. You can't prohibit the use of office space or any type of space for one political party or the other, or a third political party or whatever. You can't do it because it's unconstitutional. So I don't know if the gentleman just misspoke, but obviously you cannot prohibit the office use for a political party everywhere in town. And of course, you haven't done so already because the Hunterdon County Republican Committee exists in the Highway Retail District as a permitted use. I would obviously further note that the Hunterdon County Democratic Committee is moving or proposing to move down the street from 155 Main. And that's something like, I don't know, 200 yards. You all know better than I. So they obviously have been an active participant and office holder in this town, for a while. So, that's why we believe that the zoning officer's determination is incorrect, because it's not, consonant with what your zoning ordinance, states. So if I can have Mr. Banish, please, Mr. Banish. Is that? Who else is that? Is Michael here? Is there somebody named Michael here?
No, but Michelle Tag is here if you need me as an
Oh.
HCDC
Okay.
executive member,
Thank you. I didn't know that was you. Nice to meet you.
nor I you, but appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Just make sure that the microphone gets over to Frank.
Okay, Frank, if you could just raise your right hand, you swear the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you very much.
Evening. Yeah, but Ms. Vance, you need to just tell the board, who you are and what your connection to this property is.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we just stop sharing the screen so that we can see online?
What about that?
Yes, my name is Frank Banish. I'm a licensed professional planner. My business, Banish Associates, Inc., has been headquartered on Main Street at 111 Main since 2006. No other tenants or other occupancies besides my office has been in the building throughout that period of time. And my understanding tonight was that I was here to basically be a factual witness that would say to you before, that testified about what I just said. And then when asked about what the uses were before I bought it from Dr. Costas. And when Dr. Costas was the dentist who owned the building, his dental office was on the second floor. He and his wife lived on the third floor, and his mother lived on the first floor. I understand that sometime prior to that, there was a business called Iron Mountain Stoneware during the days when Mikasa was in its heyday. And those uses were very popular in the middle of town. So that's what I know about the zoning history of the property. I was not retained in this matter to give a professional planning testimony. I think as you heard, the arguments here are largely legal arguments. I would just observe that the use of the word similar takes on a particular meaning here because it's only used in a few cases in the ordinance. And in this particular case, it's used to describe a variety of things that this type of an organization does. They do management, they do research and development to create policy that they promote. So they do, PR type activities. They do the accounting and the other things that go along with managing the operations. So when we say and similar services, I think it's possible to find aspects of a number of the things specifically permitted that are part of the activities here. The office category, and any arguments about the master plan are for another day, so I'm not here to talk about what the master plan says or shouldn't say. I've been recently able to comment on the fact that you have a long-standing history of developing and updating a master plan that's been thoughtful and always attempted to try to live up to the true character of the borough. So I don't have a gripe with the master plan. I'm really here just to say that the use of this space as an office not only seems to me to be, and again, I'm not retained as the planner, so you have a planner, but she'll tell you what she thinks, and I respect her a lot. But when we think about the use of buildings on Main Street, the fact that from the Flemington Circle, the Main Street Circle, all the way up to Church Street, those are all residential buildings. And then when you cross Church Street, most of the way to Main Street, those are almost all residential buildings. And when you get into the part of town where there are really storefronts that call out retail use, they're a little further into town. So I feel like because number one, I've been operating as an office space all that time. Number two, that probably I don't want to characterize the use by the others, but when I opened the business, I had 9 people working for me, and we filled up every parking space every day. Right now, we have 3 people there full-time that are not filling 9 parking spaces. So there's certainly room on my property for additional parking. and I can let others characterize what that parking is like. I think that's probably all I have to say.
If the board has questions for the witness.
Does anyone on the board have questions for this witness?
So please no.
Checking our board members online, I don't see any hands raised, I'm just saying. Thank you. Oh, hold on, so, Mr. Bennett. I didn't, did any members of the public have questions for that witness for Mr. Banish? Before we move on? No.
Yeah,
No.
that's what she,
Okay, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Just one more witness very quickly.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lee Tag, and I am the secretary of the Hunterdon County Democratic Committee.
Raise your hand, Michelle, just for the testimony you're about to give this board the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Michelle, just quickly, does the Hunterdon County Democratic Committee do the same thing as the Hunterdon County Republican Committee?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay, and
In terms of,
you want to, in very, sentence or less, like
I-
summarize what that is?
I think in terms of campaign work, frequency of being in the building, the numbers of people that come into the office space, it is running a campaign, it is having business practices, having meetings like the Republicans would do in their space. It should be pretty identical. We may be fewer, but the basis of the efforts are the same.
So,
Okay, do any members of the board have any questions for this witness? No, any members of the public have questions for this witness? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
I have a couple of questions.
Professional.
If you wanna go first, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
going,
So you had mentioned, just a couple of questions, you had mentioned that the Republican organization has office space in the HR district that had been granted a zoning permit, and I wanted to find out, can you tell us when it got a zoning permit and how, and under what SIC code it was allocated to?
I don't know the answer to the second question. It appears to have been granted sometime in the 2012-2013 time period. That's my understanding.
Mayor, just let's let the testimony.
Could be
go
wrong,
through.
but I'd love to be corrected because I want to be factual. But the zone itself has been in the highway zone has been in existence since I believe 2012. But that's when it was adopted. And I don't believe there have been any changes to it.
Okay. And so I just want to put a finer point on it. By virtue of it being located there, the assumption is if it was located legally, they received the zoning permit and any construction permits.
Correct. That's correct.
But we can't verify that the permit was actually granted. Is that right?
I'm sorry.
Can it be verified that a permit was granted? Or confirmed that it was?
Well, it certainly can be because the zoning officer will have granted the use. But are you suggesting that it's not allowed to operate there?
No, I'm not. It would just be helpful.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I'm just trying to drill down. Is there a
Yeah.
document that would be helpful to the board that that zoning officer
Yes.
signed off this use in the HR district, approved, best case scenario is
Yeah.
set under item number?
Yeah, the zoning officer's documentation of that would be helpful. I would agree with you. We did Oprah certain documents, but didn't receive that, unfortunately.
Was it requested and it just wasn't?
I don't think so specifically.
Yeah, that was my question too.
That's
Certainly
a
I
great
have
question.
no reason to think that what you're stating to this board isn't true. But it would be very difficult for them to rely on that without the actual proof coming from either showing an open request for that specific document was made and indicated they don't have it, or the actual document, or even I don't know who the zoning officer was at the time, but that sort of testimony. A CO, possibly something, you know,
Right.
along those lines.
Yeah.
Again, I have no reason to think that what you're saying isn't
No, I
true, but, again, if the
Yeah.
board's gonna rely on it in order to make its determination and override the zoning officer's, determination of the use, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would have two responses to that, if you don't mind.
No, sure.
One is that, again, it's. You're, to say that it's not an approved use there is to imply that it's, not a permitted use there. And that it wasn't approved, and so therefore that it's acting illegally there. And so that's kind of a funny thing. I would say secondly, so you should presume the counter. And that is that it was approved as a use at that site. And the ordinance was in effect when it was approved. And secondly, I would say, to the extent that the board wants to get to the bottom of that issue, it could conditionally overturn the zoning officer's determination, subject to reviewing that document.
And those could all be options available to the board, again, just trying to build a record.
Yeah, I understand.
Something else that I think might be helpful too, and please, again, in no way in trying to get this information, am I implying or saying that
No,
that's not legally allowed there. There was a assumption that it was authorized in connection with the SIC, those specific SIC codes. Typically, there would be a showing to the board that these were the SIC codes in effect at this time of the ordinance, nothing has changed at that point. So I don't know if you have any, like, kind of like a pre-existing non-conforming
Yes, I understand.
analysis. So anything you have for the board in that respect?
Yes, certainly nothing has changed with respect to the ordinance, since that use went into effect in the highway, retail district. But to get to your first question, it is an assumption by me, that, item or use number 34 in the highway retail district and the identical use number 26 in the downtown business district is the appropriate use category for this identical use by both of the political parties, because and that's because it talks about research and development, management, public relations, and similar services. That would be the most logical. Now, I will tell you, there is an SIC code or a couple SIC codes that are in the 2133 and 2233 range as standard industrial codes, and they relate to government offices. I looked to see if there would be a specific thing for political, but it really relates to government. So I guess if the board, if the governing body wanted to have a permitted use for that kind of thing, it could look to one of those codes, but it hasn't done that.
Is that any questions? Any questions? Or do I have some?
I think that's all the questions I have for the attorney.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, just before we, yeah, we didn't, I didn't like to have the board to question the attorney as a witness if anybody has, because he's made a lot of testimony. If anybody feels that they'd like to question.
I do have a question. While your testimony was that,
I wasn't testifying, I was arguing.
while your argument cites that perhaps the Republican committee came in under SIC code 87 or code 87, I'm not even sure it's not SIC code. I'm not debating whether or not it's similar to all the things in item 87, but there also is one other item in the highway retail, which was we allowed shopping centers incorporating any preceding use. So timing is of the essence here, because if in fact we had, it's a little bit like other applications that we had where we looked back all the way to 1972. So we did allow in the highway retail district, which we don't allow in the downtown business, was shopping centers incorporating any preceding use.
I'm sorry, which, oh, that's 40, number 40?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it could have been, and again, it all comes down to timing. I don't know how long the Republican committee office has been there.
Yeah, it's, I will say, it's not a retail building, it's an office building.
It is a retail building, actually. It is a retail building, actually, that the Republican Party and its retail.
So I'm only questioning if you, so you don't know the date that the Republican committee came in. We think you had testified that you thought it was somewhere around 2012 or 2013.
That's my understanding.
I don't know, Beth, what the date is on when this was incorporated.
Well, your ordinance. Go ahead.
I mean, there are in the borough code online, you can see, it's not a complete record, to be fair, but you can see dates of amendments. So for example, in the HR district, you can see that commercial agriculture, for example, was added as part of ordinance 2012-01 in 2012. And there are a variety of other examples of that. The HR district is noted as being updated as part of that same ordinance. I don't recall the other changes. I know around that time we incorporated commercial agriculture into this district, and I believe farmers markets as well. I don't recall what other aspects of the ordinance, such as the long list of permitted uses, may have also been amended at that time.
So for all we know.
Sorry, Councilor, you're talking about the highway retail district?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we did look at the disposition list and it hasn't changed. Those permitted codes have not changed
Since 2012?
since ordinance number 2012-01.
And I just think that being made part of the record to,
Mhm.
you know, show that would be helpful. And again, just for everybody's information, I mean, these are things that are coming across us on a regular basis, so, you know, to make sure we have as much for the record as possible is helpful.
I have no further question.
I'm sorry.
But just following on from Todd's question, we don't know when the Republican Party went in. Well, we have somebody.
The answer to the question, but
I mean, when am I allowed to like,
No, listen, certainly if members of the board have knowledge as to this information, that's certainly
I
fine.
cannot say whether it was in 97 or 98, but I can definitively say that when I won the election as the first woman freeholder in this county, the party was in that building. And Republican headquarters was already there in 1999. And it was there before 1999, but I cannot definitively say whether it was 96 or 97 or 98, but it was there in 99.
And Mayor, just so the record's clear, are you a member of the Hunterdon County Republican?
I am not. I resigned my position when I became mayor because I thought it was fair to represent everybody and not one party.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
So my question on the testimony, the argument, however you want to phrase it, let's forget for a second the other use at Plaza One. Let's just put that aside, that whole argument, because I think there is a documentary question that may or not be able to be solved here. Am I also hearing correctly from the testimony of the witnesses, in your statement that you would argue that under DB 26, which is SIC Code 87, engineering, surveying, architectural, so on and so forth, is your argument also that this denial was incorrect because the operations of this organization fall under SIC 87? Am I hearing that correctly? Because I think we
Yeah,
can solve this
right.
without having to have
That's a
testimony
good
about the
point,
Republican headquarters. If you're arguing that this should have been allowed because it falls under 87,
Yeah.
is that, am I understanding what your testimony is?
You are. I think, you know, if you look at that comparison sheet that I prepared, I think you can knock out number 39 because it's not a medical and dental. It's not legal services, right? So the two most logical ones would be 33 and 34 or 73 and 87. I think it should be 87 because that's most closely associated with what the two organizations do.
And is the testimony of Mr. Banish that what's going on in that building right now is falling under that use, that SIC 87 as well?
When we say similar services to engineering, surveying, architectural, that's what we're doing. right?
Okay, so again, just making sure that
That's a fair
I'm understanding the
point.
testimony correctly, right,
Don't,
that
it's a trick question.
not a trick question, I'm just making sure I'm understanding the testimony correctly, that the testimony of, is that the existing operations in this particular property fall under that code, that the applicant's business operations falls, you're arguing under that code as well, and this should be a permitted use.
Right.
In opposition to what the zoning officer ruled, that's what I'm hearing the argument, right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
And of course,
That's
as
it.
I said,
That's it.
as I stated earlier, the Hudson County Democratic Committee office was
Hudson County.
Hunterdon County, that office existed on Main Street, right, just up the road.
Okay, any other questions from this, from the board? Anybody online?
I have one.
Dennis?
Just a question. Did you have any conversation with the zoning officer regarding the Hunterdon County Republican Committee that they are there and why are they allowed, but you were denied?
Well, for what it's worth, sir, I'm sort of pinch hitting for somebody who went to Thanksgiving early, so I certainly didn't, but I don't know the answer to whether or not my colleague did.
Thank you.
Right. That's questions.
That's questions.
Questions. Well, we close so that we can have discussion. First, we ask the public.
Well, and I also think it might be helpful to ask the question of, based upon some of the questions of the board, is there anything else you'd like to look into to provide to the board so that they can make their determinations? Or would you like them to proceed with public comment and closing and discussion? I know you are pinch hitting, I
You're
didn't
asking
realize,
me?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Because there have been some questions, I know the mayor did testify,
Right.
but there's been some other questions, and now that I understand you're pinch hitting, I don't know if maybe your colleague might have had some other information, but.
Does the board have an interest in obtaining that information? I guess I'd throw the question back.
It's always helpful to have definitive testimony and evidence.
Documentation.
Evidence, thank you. Documentation makes things much clearer rather than hearsay, which we can get in a little bit. It's not clear, right? It's not. Right, it's not clear when those dates, if you, aside from the SIC code, we've got two arguments, right, the SIC code, and we've got the Republicans can do it, so we want, it's unfair for the Democrats not to be able to do it, and that's coming across more as hearsay right now, right? I mean, tell me if I'm right, please. Because of this date question and the fact that you're saying that the date of the incorporation of the HR district is therefore assumed to have been active at the time that they moved in, which we don't know.
Yeah, I think the answer is logical that the use has been there for some time. And so it was a permitted use under some circumstance, unless the board has an understanding that there was a zoning board application that was approved to allow that use. Having said that, however, I agree with you that it would be good for the board to have all the facts.
Right.
Well, let me ask this, Mr. Chair, Ms. Madam Chair, are you requesting that the board adjourn this so we can get those additional facts?
Whatever your typical procedure for doing that, either tabling the application or adjourning it to the next meeting is fine. I don't know how you typically do it. I certainly don't want to withdraw the application, and I think.
Oh, no, I don't think
Yeah.
that's certainly not what we're
Right,
talking about at all.
and I mean, I could just roll the dice and have you vote tonight, but I like you would like to see the actual facts.
I think it would really help. We have a lot of very intelligent board members who appreciate facts. So put it that way, and it certainly assists with memorialization and making sure we, on what basis the board deliberated and made decisions rather than hearsay and feeling. You know,
So we can table, yeah,
So I'm asking what additional facts, because there are two arguments here. One argument is, it's an allowable use because it's SIC 87 and related. And there's one argument that says it's the same as highway retail. They're completely different arguments.
and I think we should leave it up to the applicant and council to
Yeah.
figure out.
Listen,
what-
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right, go ahead.
If we come back with indeterminate facts or facts that there's a pre-existing use, we're still gonna come back to the board and rely on the second argument, right? Which is this and similar services, SIC code 87. It's the most logical, you have to allow it somewhere,
okay.
all right?
But would you like to
Yes.
adjourn and return at a later date? We can work out the date. You'll have to let us know.
Well, I
when
think
you
what
would
we
have the
should do-
documentation so that we
We
can
need
put
to
you on the
make an
agenda.
announcement, yeah,
Yeah,
I,
return. How long do you think you would need?
Or
We
I
have
have
two
a
more
7-day
meetings.
offer request, so,
Oh, you need to consult with.
no, I don't, we would love to have the next meeting, presumably it's sometime in December, I don't know if it would be December.
It's meetings. We have two, we have the 10th and the 17th.
Okay, let's do the 17th.
We already have the 17th. Okay, I think that's fair. Yeah, I was just gonna say, because we already have two public hearings probably slated for the 10th, so, and that would give sufficient time.
I-
We'll submit it also in
Yeah.
time for the board to see it. Appreciate
For
it.
sure, for sure. I will just say the board, unless you request it, it would not be our anticipated that we would have more testimony. Or that I would even have the witnesses back here unless the board desires to have that.
It's your argument to
Okay.
make, it's up to you, that's fine.
Yeah, I just don't know
But
whether-
This is on the record now, we just come back.
Yeah.
With whatever extra testimony you want to give.
yeah, and I think, and if we wanna just ask one more time, if anybody in the public, anybody on the board has any questions of the applicant's witnesses, then at least we've given it one more shot, and then if you decide to bring them back, you can, if not, at least we've done that.
Perfect.
Right, so having said that, does everybody have any before they? Nope.
Thank you,
Happy
you too, Mary.
Thanksgiving. See
Thank
you
you.
on the 17th. Thank you.
What, the 17th?
And no further notice will be provided.
Yes, correct.
Notice will be provided.
Thank you, Ed.
Right. Yeah, so for everybody's, before I move on to the next agenda item,
Did you take your number?
we usually break at 9 PM for like a break. It would seem logical, being as we have a gap, if we just have it will break now, and then we won't need to break at 9. That, right, so that's what we're gonna do, we're just gonna break now for the board to have 5 minutes, step away. And then we will reconvene at 8:20. Fair enough, 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
4 minutes, thanks.
That's it. All right. I'll take roll call.
Yes, please.
You come back at 8:25. Mayor Carroll. Here. Councilwoman Sorrow. Here. Ms. Giffen.
Yeah.
Mr. Dashna.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Swanton.
Here, here.
Bingle. Here. Mr. Eckel.
Here.
Mr. Show.
Here.
Ms. Kaczynski. Here. Mr. Clarico.
Here.
Ms. McManus. Here. Mr. Chapel.
Here.
Thank you.
Right, before we get going on our next agenda item, I'll just give some, for people that haven't been to one of our meetings before, We have some rules, first of all, we have some rules about engagement in terms of you've seen some of it in action, coming to the microphone, giving your name and your address if you're making a comment. But the applicant will be providing witnesses and testimony just like last time before we get to that point. We usually, because this is most likely going to go over at another meeting, we will allow questions for each individual witness as they come up so that we can capture that for the people that hear the testimony can ask questions rather than leaving it all the questions to the end of all the testimony, which is likely to be another meeting. Okay, so we will allow that. That will be happening. A thing on timing. Our rules of engagement allow us to, not engagement, we're not at war, sorry. Our rules of operation, shall we say usually no new items after 10:30, but this one will be an item in and of itself. So, and then we say our absolute latest is 11 to be here. I'm just putting that out there. We will not go past 11 o'clock. In fact, I don't. And here's what I'd like to ask the applicant when we're going forward with this, is if we reach a natural point where you've one witness is finished and we can get that testimony done and questions for that, and it's say 10:30, we will end then and start new witnesses on another day. Okay? That's fair enough. That's the way we're gonna run it, just so everyone's aware.
And if I could just add that, for the recording and for the record, if we could just have one person speaking at the same time, one time. When multiple people are talking, everything gets muddled and we cannot make a good record, so. Appreciate your cooperation.
Yeah, it's a good point, because even when we do these, when we listen at home, it's very difficult to hear multiple conversations. So again, I'll remind everybody, this is a legal proceeding and we want to make sure that the record captures everything correctly for legal reasons. But having said that, I'm not opening the public hearing immediately because, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Clerico to help me here. The board also saw Mr. Clerico's report when we agreed this for completeness. We gave some temporary waivers, which were meant to be that the applicant agreed that those temporary waivers, which were, we let them not provide some things at completeness, they were supposed to bring them to be ready before the public hearing took place. And there is some concern over whether those temporary waivers are actually provided before we can go to public hearing. So Bob, can you just run through those with us, and then the board can decide whether we want to move ahead or not?
Sure, well, in this regard, I did.
You're gonna let the applicant respond whether they think it's documents.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so, I outlined in the first page of the letter, the items, again, from the board's minutes. The
Just
item,
reference the date of the letter.
my letter is dated November 23rd. I outlined the items that where the board had granted permanent checklist waivers, at your prior meeting, at your prior meeting. And the ones where you granted temporary checklist waivers, condition being that the applicants would address those items before they would begin a public hearing on the project. So I went through all those items. Rather than bore you with the ones they completed, I updated the checklist to identify what they did. And in the letter, I only expanded upon the items where I didn't see, at least the information I had available, what I would consider compliance with the amendment. So on the second page of the letter, I started, again, these are somewhat overlapping checklist item P and 23 deal with the stormwater aspects of the project. The specific issue here that was brought up originally was that the applicant had submitted all their stormwater design reports and documentation, but they had not done the soil testing that's required on several of the stormwater basins. The reason they had given earlier was that they, because those basins are in the portion of the site that has contaminated soil, and the indication, again, I tried to quote things from my notes and from the board's minutes, that the DEP, who also reviewed the application, again, this is one of those situations we have dual jurisdiction. DEP was reviewing this because they have a stream and coaching permit, they were doing fill in the floodplain, and they were doing activities that required DEP approval, which they documented, and which they obtained approval from DEP. The borough also has the obligation to review this from a stormwater perspective. and determine that they're either in compliance with, well, they have to determine they're in compliance with those regulations. We have no provisions to grant any kind of waiver from those particular provisions. So the issue at hand here was not having the stormwater regulations require when you're doing stormwater basins of various types of design, that you have to document the presence of a seasonal high groundwater condition. They establish certain standards for a basin, the bottom of a basin, how much above that seasonal high groundwater they need to be. And they basically had no testing in that regard. The issue was, the indication was that that's on the contaminated soil part of the site, and that they weren't, DEP had told them they weren't either allowed, and the applicant speak better, either allowed or it wasn't recommended that they do that testing until they actually start remediating the site, which kind of puts the board a bit of a dilemma, because at some point you have to make a finding that the stormwater design that has been presented is compliant with the stormwater regulations, but you're lacking documentation, at least in this particular regard, in order to make that finding. Again, this is from the board's minutes. Board members might have a different recollection of what was discussed back in October, but the applicant's response was that they had discussions with DEP, and DEP, quote, agreed that the stormwater testing should be performed once the site remediation and cleanup work has been completed. The minutes, the meeting state that the applicant was to, quote, provide a letter from DEP, end quote, confirming that the soil testing cannot be performed until the site remediation and cleanup has been completed. The documentation that's been submitted back does not include a letter. So we're kind of back to the situation that we have admittedly a lot of documentation here to review, but we're lacking the one piece of the documentation that would prevent me from being able to tell the board that the design that's before you is compliant with those regulations. You probably want to do these one at a time. But what I tried to summarize in the report is, what the applicant is saying in their response, what I'm reading from the board's minutes, and what the implication of that means in terms of hearing the application. Now, again, the waivers you granted before were temporary. Your condition in granting those waivers before was that you wouldn't start a public hearing if you had that information. You could certainly revisit that decision tonight if you want to move forward in some way, shape, or form, or with some other condition associated with that. But that's what you're gonna be dealt with. There's 5 items here that kind of fall in that category. So it's probably better we talk about these one at a time, because they are specific to specific issues, so.
That was, I was the one who asked for the letter, and asked you to get a letter, from the DEP regarding that condition. Was that something that you weren't able to get done, or?
That's correct. We attempted, we were not able to get it. I mean, this was based on, and I can ask Mr. Pucci, who had the direct conversations, but my understanding is that we were unable to obtain written confirmation of that. That was absolutely the request of the DEP to hold off. And just to put a finer point on it, we do not argue at all that these seasonal high water tests need to be done. We just believe that we can do it in conjunction with the remediation, and if for some reason the basin design would not work appropriately with the findings of those results, we'd have to come back.
Don, let me ask you a question. The request to the DEP was, give us a letter stating that it's okay to wait for the testing until after we do the remediation. Was that the ask? Or was the ask? What was the ask?
Ms. Kaczynski, I mean, should we swear in Mr. Pucci before, because I think I need to have him, he had the direct conversation.
Yep, absolutely. I swear the testimony you're about to give his board to speak the whole truth and nothing but.
Yes. State your name.
Michael Pucci.
And you're a licensed civil engineer and professional planner?
I am.
License is current, state of
Correct.
Chair.
Question, are we going into public hearing? Do we have it?
No,
We're not.
it's just
Okay,
a
all right, so it's
completeness
just.
hearing. Yep.
Learning
Testimony for the
testimony.
completeness hearing. Correct.
Thank you very much.
So you heard that.
I did.
Sorry.
So my recollection was at the last completeness hearing, what I said was I had correspondence with DEP prior to the completeness hearing, actually a year and a half ago, regarding this issue when DEP was reviewing the flood hazard area permit. I thought I had something in writing that specifically said this, but I did not find a specific wording of it. What I found was correspondence back and forth on completeness issues with DEP a year and a half ago. And then DEP finally issued the flood hazard area permit. The flood hazard area permit has a specific condition in it. The project is in compliance with NJAC 7:8, the stormwater management regulations. So Mr. Clerico is absolutely correct. He has to certify from his perspective. DEP has already done that dual review and said that the entire design of the project is compliant with those rules. Notwithstanding that, what I tried to do was then reach out to the individuals I've been meeting with and speaking with during the process of that DEP flood hazard permit. And they said they will not issue such a letter. DEP is set up where you have to apply for a permit or a permit by authorization, a permit by rule. You have a long process to go through, and there's no such process for them to just issue a letter. So the fact that they issued a permit which specifically says that we are in compliance with the stormwater management rules.
But where in the permit does it say that you can wait, do that testing until after remediation?
The stormwater management reports that they approved have that language in it. They
It does.
include, yes, the
Can you
reports.
provide that? to Mr.
They have been
Clerico?
provided, they're part of the record that has been submitted. They're part of the, I think it's, I'm gonna say 1,500 or so page.
Well, that's why I'm
stormwater
asking,
management.
can you please provide that specific citation to Mr. Clerico versus having your client having to pay him for
Oh, no. I
laborious
will tell you
hours
exactly what
looking
pages
for
it's
it,
on.
but
I will tell them exactly what pages it is on in that report. There's the letter from the LSRP for the project site, specifically stating, wait until after remediation to do the testing.
Mr.
And-
Clerico, if he can show you that in the report, will that satisfy you?
Well, again, whether DEP said that or basically implied that by approving the project without the documentation. Again, they're reviewing the stormwater, reports and documentation. The applicant didn't apply to DEP for approval of the stormwater report. They applied for permits as part of the DEP's review of those permits, for filling in the floodplain and the other associated, regulated activities. They required the applicant to provide a copy of their stormwater, review. So it is an awkward situation where you have these, where the borough is under our stormwater permit issued by DEP, we're specifically obligated to make findings that what's being provided to us is compliant. When you get a situation like this where DEP, in this particular case in advance, makes they review documentation and say what they're gonna say, doesn't, negate the borough's obligation to still make the same type of findings. So we're not in a disagreement as to there's information we don't have, that, again, I won't be able to advise the board that what they're submitting is compliant. The applicant is basically essentially saying the same thing. Well, we're gonna give that to you at some later date. The reference here, I gather, is that some of the stormwater report or the LSR, fleet report, is a statement that they can't do this, either can or won't, or don't, whatever the wording is in there, that they haven't done it for these various reasons. And that's one of the documents that's of the hundreds of documents, citation that went to DEP, the DEP reviewed, and issued the permit for the regulated elements of the project. So, the question is, the board could, I suppose, do a temporary waiver to let them start to proceed. My concern is at what point at what point in the process does the board have to, as part of their finding, and I believe it's part of granting a preliminary approval, that the project's in compliance. And I'm not sure how we do that. I don't know how we approve it conditioned upon starting construction on a project to determine whether what we just approved is compliant or not. That's really the dilemma.
Would we have to make it I'll ask the professionals, would making it a condition of approval that had to be provided and that they wouldn't be able to move? I'm saying, can we put a hard stop that they, at that point when they do that testing, they cannot go further with regulatory compliance, resolution compliance before that is received by us? I'm thinking that's the risk we're running, is it, Bob, that if we don't have it, we can't stop them at this point if we don't have it now.
If it's a condition of resolution, if it's a resolution compliance condition,
Mm.
and all resolution compliance conditions must be satisfied before building permits are issued. Does that satisfy it, or do we still run the risk of having?
Well, they're gonna
Some
presumably, again, and I'm not, in a normal circumstance, an applicant is entitled to start demolition work on their property. I understand there might be some other implication here that precluding them from doing it, but if that issue off the table, you know, if they're gonna start site construction work, remediation here is gonna involve removing buildings, parking lots, taking out contaminated soil. The whole site's gonna be disturbed at that point. And if you wanna make that the hard stop, that they do the testing then and either prove that these basins that they designed and presented to the board are in fact compliant, that's fine. If they do that testing and determine that, no, they're not compliant, they have to be redesigned, I don't know what the implication of that is.
Well, the implication would be whatever language we imposed in the condition of the resolution.
Yeah, but the question I was gonna ask then is, in the extreme case, it may end up being that it changes substantially the layout, the road rights of way alignments, the number of housing units, like a number of those things could be impacted depending on which particular stormwater piece of stormwater infrastructure for the whole site you're talking about. Like if you're talking about what's happening behind the Brown Street Park, it's gonna be different than if you're talking about what's gonna happen fronting on Route 12 versus something that's happening on the western side of the property. Those are all gonna have different, my concern is that those are all gonna have different implications on circulation, construction, literally to the point of like, it might affect how buildings need to get built. One or two fewer housing units triggers our requirements under third round for affordable housing. The calculation may get, like, all of these pieces work together. And as you're saying, Bob, like, my concern would be where we get to a point where they've done a ton of demolition, carted out all the contaminated soil, and then are able to do that testing. And then we've got a site that is sitting half empty, excavated, before they have to then come back, redesign, and come back in to a series of hearings, because it's gonna affect all of the other pieces of the construction on site. Like, that's, we don't wanna have, I mean, like, is there any way we can avoid the potentiality of the thing sitting half done for 9 months while the architects are working through plans and us having hearings about it?
Well, let me go back, and I had a conversation, earlier with the engineer, and I think we had a similar conversation back in October, perhaps. Is there something precluding you from doing the soil testing at this time without just, going out, excavating, doing a soil log? If you're removing contaminated soil, deal with that as a specific.
Contaminated soil is precluding that, yes.
No, if you dug a soil log on your site, and you, as part of doing the soil testing, you brought up contaminated soil, but you dug the hole for the purpose of doing the soil testing or reading a soil log or whatever the case may be, you could deal with that contaminated soil.
I'm not an LSRP, so I'm not gonna answer that
Well,
specifically. I'm gonna tell you that
if you could deal with it
there's
on
not
a
a
mass,
if.
if you could deal with it on a mass basis when you're doing the whole site, I would think you could certainly deal with it on a soil log by soil log basis.
Again, I'm not an LSRP, so I cannot answer how that will happen. I can tell you I've worked on contaminated sites before, and they have been cleaned before testing has been done. And to put Mr. Dashner's question at ease, it's not as if the project is designed and will be totally redesigned if something is found to be different. The project has a bunch of redundant design built into it. All of the small scale bioretention basins on the east side where the contaminated soils are have been designed with under drains, so they don't need infiltration. Then what they do need is 1 foot separation to seasonal groundwater table, as Mr. Clark was stated before. We have to document the seasonal table, and we're not at all trying to get around doing that. In fact, the LSRP in their very initial analysis of the site a long time ago, as part of the due diligence, years and years ago, did a sort of a groundwater mounting analysis, and the seasonal high was deep enough where it's not a concern to us. There are 2 larger scale bioretention systems on the east side that could rely upon, under the current design, using infiltration. So not only do we need a separation, which is greater, it's 2 feet, but we also need to know infiltrative rates of the soil. And if they come back poor, or if the soils are contaminated and not remediated, and they have to keep remediating and keep blending and keep removing until they do work. However, as I did have a conversation with Mr. Clerico earlier, one of those two basins is the Brown Street Basin, which was actually done as part of helping the borough with their flooding problem for offsite work, not anything on-site. That basin can easily have under drains put in it, and the one down at Route 12, with a slight bit of adjustment of grading, can have under drains. So the whole issue of infiltration is gonna go away. We can modify that basin, and therefore the only thing we have to document is, of course, to make sure that we do have the 1 foot clearance between the bottom of the basin and the seasonal water table.
At least for the record, infiltration is not the issue, because you have you do not have an obligation here to do infiltration. You
But we don't have an obligation.
You don't have an
We did-
obligation.
We did show
In
it,
fact,
but
They were doing it on a couple of the basins is immaterial.
Right.
And the distinction between a basin, that doesn't have the under drain and one that does is the ones that, don't have it under the criteria, you have to document a 2 foot separation between the bottom of the basin and whatever you determine to be the seasonal high groundwater elevation. With the under drains, that criteria drops to 1 foot.
Right.
But if you still have to document.
Right, but the reason why I was asking the question was, and from what I'm hearing, that's what you're saying is that there might need to be a pause, there might need to be some re-engineering of these systems, but you're asserting that it won't necessarily substantively change the.
I don't think it'll change the layout one bit whatsoever. It might lift a basin a few inches if we found a seasonal high groundwater table higher than what the preliminary testing from years ago anticipated it to be.
And I can't comment on the what if.
Agreed.
I'm asking, Beth, go ahead, because I think you're gonna go where I'm going.
Well, I was just gonna throw out an idea.
Yeah.
Maybe it makes sense that the application, assuming we get through and approval makes sense from the board's perspective, maybe this is a preliminary application, preliminary approval upon final or prior to final, they submit the stormwater, the soil testing, any confirmation changes to the stormwater management plan and submit for final.
But what you're hearing here in the way of testimony is that even under that scenario, they basically have to demolish the whole site. Remove, correct me if I'm wrong, that's what you're saying, right? The remediation here.
I believe demolition, I'm not sure if it's gonna be done in phases or not. I think the first phase is the southern half.
Well, the project, that's another factor. If you're looking for a phased approval, you need to.
No, we're not looking for a phased approval, no, I'm just
But
looking.
again, so we're looking holistically here at an application that's the whole project. And for us to dispose of that application or to adjudicate the request, we have to have the documentation that says, now, if we did it with preliminary, with the conditions of preliminary, that before they come back for final, before they do something, you have to define what that something is.
Right.
That they provide this testing.
Yeah.
And if that testing reveals that they have to change the design, well, then I'll have to come back and change. it.
And to Mr. Darcy's point, if I can just ask this witness, the site remediation happened, and your point is good, everything's open, right? We're open, we've removed the contaminated material, but the site is open. How long does the soil testing take? And to get the results?
The geotechnical testing that Mr. Clark and I are discussing, for the amount of time, maybe a week.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That sound fair to you?
No, what I was looking to see is how long that site would be open if you get the site, get the testing done, get the report to Mr. Clerico, us have another meeting to be able to then do what Beth said about then allow.
So, and I want to share a provision of the redevelopment plan. In the section titled application for development, it states no building shall be demolished prior to the lot which it sits being subject to a preliminary site plan application unless required for public safety. And so I just think the board should acknowledge that they're unable to begin demolishing buildings on the property prior to completing preliminary, not final, but preliminary site plan.
And your proposal is that the preliminary would allow them to demolish, do the site recreation, then do the testing, get the testing report, and get that to us for full approval.
Yeah, I mean, given the testimony we've heard where they need to remove the improvements in order to do the testing, I would be reluctant to see the improvements removed prior to preliminary. I mean, yes, because it takes, that requirement set forth in the redevelopment plan, but also I think that this is it's a really important site for the borough. We want to make sure that once the buildings are taken down, it is on track for redevelopment to the extent possible. And it seems like this is a bit of a pickup in that, but, given the testimony, maybe it's necessary.
Yeah, and just to round it up, I mean, what I was concerned about from a completeness perspective was not only Mr. Clerica's ability to review and provide feedback to the board and the board to be able to move forward, but also our ability to proceed at this point with the hearing to talk about all the other aspects of the application in front of us. And what I'm happy to hear is that there may be changes to the stormwater, which we have to review, but they're not gonna necessarily change terribly all the other parts that would be presented as part of the application. My fear was that we were gonna have to have some
Wasting
sort of
time.
it was a big waste of time, and we're sitting there dealing with an open
Of course,
lot.
we still have that risk, but their testimony is that they feel that that's like a very, very small risk of that happening.
And that's, I mean, so that was my concern, was that in terms of as a completeness, if we proceeded and allowed this to go for preliminary but not final, would we have to go through a whole nother set of hearings
Right.
with an empty abandoned site? And it sounds like no, that that everything else is mostly intact, it's just a question of the design of those particular aspects of the infrastructure, which, you know,
Right.
makes me feel a little bit more comfortable proceeding with those conditions that we were talking about.
Right,
if I
one of
may-
my concerns with the timing that we talked about a little bit, I do want to raise this, is if we're leaving the site open while we're waiting for that process to go for us to give final, that is all open, the ground is open, you get a big storm, the runoff, the ground that's open now, it's gonna be wide open, right?
They're gonna have to have soil.
Well,
It's gonna-
stuff. They're gonna have
To make sure it doesn't go into the waterways and things.
Yeah,
They're gonna-
well, there'll be swift controls in place and the like,
Okay.
but I think, I do wanna speak about timing. So, making this a condition of preliminary approval, of a final approval, I don't see how that saves us any time and reduces the period where it's open, because we go out and do the testing, then we have to come back and apply for final approval. That to me is extending it. Number two, and this isn't really a concern for the board, but I don't get funding to start the demo, and I don't get funding to start the remediation unless I have preliminary and final site plan approval unappealable. That's what my contract says. I'm just sharing that with you as the realities of the package here. Making it a preliminary doesn't help me. What I've thrown on the table is said, I cannot get a building permit to build any structures unless and until I've proven that the stormwater design works. I
And then you
think
need
that's
to
a
do the
reasonable-
soil testing then.
Yes,
Then you need to do it beforehand, and what we just discussed, we can't do. Because it doesn't help you. What we just discussed then wouldn't help you, because you wouldn't be able to get your funding if we only. did the
Correct,
partial.
making
So
it
you,
a condition
so,
of final.
so the only answer is you need to do the soil testing before the site remediation. That's the only way, because
Well, no, what do you,
we can't, we said we didn't feel comfortable.
well, no, we could, what I guess is the question for the professionals is that if we were to make it a condition of final, as he's saying, he needs preliminary and final in order to fund the work, to actually do the remediation that we want to see happen and yada, yada, yada.
Subsequent testing.
Subsequent testing, all the rest of it, if we could. The applicant is suggesting that making the condition for building permit for constructing improvements. Is that adequate, is what I'm asking of professionals.
What risk do we open ourselves?
And what's the risk, that's what I'm asking.
Well, again, under the stormwater regulations and under your permit, when you grant this approval, you're supposed to be making a finding that what you're approving is compliant. If you feel there's a way you can do that as a condition of the approval, fine. Like I said, the applicant submitted a lot of information. We've done a complete, review on this. And if you read into our review, I think they've addressed the heart of the stormwater issue, except for this missing piece, which is not necessarily unconsequential. It's an important element. Now, again, I can't speak to the what if. What if it's raising, like you said, raising the basin, 4 inches solves the problem, or whether you end up saying, well, I can't put a basin there, or I have to pick it up 4 feet, and now I have another grading problem with the site. I don't honestly, I don't know. I don't know the extent of the implication, because we don't have the information that would tell us what that criteria is.
Is it, Bob, can you tell me, is it an unusual thing to ask for the soil testing to be done prior to site remediation, or is the normal standard procedure to do soil remediation and then the soil testing?
To be honest with you, I can't recall the site before that it was dealing with contaminated soils and stormwater management at the same time. So I don't know that I've ever, ever run across this before.
Yes, I'm just trying to determine if we're asking for something completely outside of normal procedure, or we're asking for
The
normal.
board, again, you have a lot of information here, you have a lot of public here. On this, now, there's other issues you have to deal with too. But, if you put this in the case of a temporary waiver, and maybe as part of the hearing, have the LSRP, testify as to what he can and can't do, maybe that would give you a better perspective, as to what the limitations are here.
So what the attorney represented is that prior to getting building permits, to proceed to construction, they would do the testing.
Well, the threshold would be, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they can't do this until they do all the site remediation. Which means that's demolition of all the buildings, that's removal of all the paved surfaces, that's removal of any contaminated soil, testing, hauling, taking it to wherever it's gotta go. Whether that's replacement soil, I'm not sure. And then at that point, before they do anything else, before they put pipe in the ground or put curbing in, or get any building permits or anything of that ilk, they would then do the testing. And if that resulted in some changes to the site grading, the site stormwater plan, the site whatever, they would have to come back before this board and presumably ask for an amendment to the approval to reflect whatever those changes may be. And it may very well document that they don't have to change anything.
Is that, did he get that correct? Is that?
It's close, Mayor. Couple of things, Mr. Pucci, the question was raised, is it a normal procedure to do the remediation before you do this type of soil testing? What's your experience?
I agree with Mr. Clerico. It's a rather new situation simply because DEP has not enforced this level of testing until recent stormwater management amendments, but I did have 3 sites around each other in Jersey City where the remediation was done, which was just a couple years ago, before we did detailed soil testing on the site. And that was my basis of saying that in my experience, we have done the testing after the remediation, so it's been disturbed.
So
Testing
for stormwater purposes or?
No, we just testing it. The stormwater purposes were not required. There was other testing required.
For building design, foundation design, yeah, that's a little different.
And then Mayor, just to answer your question more succinctly, it's close, but not quite. My preference and what I was offering up was that I would not pull any building permits for any of the townhomes or the veterans homes until we've satisfied the board's professionals that the stormwater design works, or come back for an amendment if necessary, which we think is pretty exceedingly unlikely. But I will need to be doing site work as I do the remediation. So it would be, I'm suggesting building permits for any of the residential structures.
Basically, you need preliminary and final approval to get financing for the project, correct?
Correct.
At which point you would start doing the demo and the cleanup of the current infrastructure that's there. When it's all gone, then you would do the testing that we're looking for.
Correct.
And it would be part of the resolution that you would not receive any building permits for townhomes or the apartments until our board professionals are satisfied with the design based on what the testing comes out as.
Or we come back for an amendment if necessary.
Right. Bob? Will that work for you? And
Yes,
Kara, will it work for Kara? And will it work
Anything
for
will
you?
work for me. I'm just saying what I'm gonna be able to tell you in a way of certifying something that if you can act on the application, without making that finding or making that definitive finding, then yeah, that would work.
And as part of that condition, I think it would also include the applicant at the next continuing hearing to bring in your LSRP to answer any questions that we might have.
Does anybody else on the board have any questions about that? I think that sums it up,
Yeah,
what we're
that's,
saying.
no, my only question is, Kara, you're okay with that kind of language in the resolution?
I am, and I think that the way that the findings and the factual testimony would have to lead us to do that the board's making that finding that's required from the engineering perspective and from the regulations perspective, based upon the testimony, and should the testimony change, they have to come back and blah, blah, blah. But I think if we do it that way and that testimony is provided, then I think everybody's covered.
I'm comfortable with that.
Everyone feel comfortable?
If they're comfortable, I'm comfortable. You guys, yeah.
Thank you for the discussion. It was very
Bob, does that
helpful.
cover all 5 items?
The rest are gonna be much easier, I think.
But at our next hearing, you're gonna have an LSO, your LSO, will be your, give the first
I
testimony.
presume he's available, he'll be
Thank you.
available.
All right, the next one.
Yeah, the next item is actually relatively simple. The applicant was required to file for a letter of interpretation with DEP and is waiting for a response. I believe that addresses the
Oh, which,
condition.
which item is this on your
The
list?
next one, the next item.
V.
I'm sorry,
Oh, okay,
V.
sorry.
V is in Victor.
Right, sorry.
The minutes talk about the applicant obtaining the LOI. I don't think that's not my recollection of the discussion. I think the requirement was that they file for it. Obviously, they're showing us wetland areas, they're showing disturbances within the wetland areas. Does your DEP cover any regulated activities in the wetland areas?
I'm sorry.
Does your DEP permit cover, is it just a flood hazard permit or does
Correct.
it cover?
Correct. It's a flood hazard permit,
Okay,
but item V in the checklist says, if issued, a copy of an LOI from DEP or letter of exemption.
no, that's true. And we left it that they had to make the application. So somewhere as part of this hearing, again, that would be a condition of any approval. And again, that might go to something before they could actually start work, but that we're doing a regulated thing with DEP. And until the LOI is issued, we don't know, or they don't know. If there are any if they're working in any regulated wetland buffers or wetland areas. That they might need other permits from the state, and again, the board, under the municipal land use law, the board cannot hold up an approval pending a state permit. You would make it a condition
Right.
of the state permit.
And we have proof of the application now, just not proof of the permit. Okay.
With the condition, so
Okay.
I pointed that out because there was a discrepancy with the minutes there.
And again, Carol, that would be covered with our usual thing in resolutions that all extra permits have to be provided, right?
Yeah, what we typically will spell out the ones that we know of and then have the catch-all language for anything that may come up otherwise.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, the next bullet point here is items 21 and 22. This deals with the gas and electric service. We did have a discussion of this back in October. The current plans we have before you do not show any proposal for electric and gas, either distribution lines or service lines or anything to the homes. Again, the minute the applicant in their response said that they're saying the board agreed that if they enhance the notes about utility and the engineer could speak to this, it would be sufficient to address the item. But the minutes of the meeting say the utilities will be provided on plans. And if there's any material changes, the location, then the plans would have to be adjusted. So again, I'm just looking for basically saying the board, since the plans do not show the gas, the board will need to clarify and decide whether this item can be given a conditional waiver of these items or whether it still remains incomplete.
Right, so this is details of gas and electric lines on the plans, we wanted to see that, where they were.
Yeah, so you have a plan before you that shows very detailed streets, grading, storm drainage, water and sewer infrastructure, including service lines to the individual homes. What you don't have is any information about the underground layout of where the electric and gas lines are gonna go, where the transformers might be, where the service lines to the individual homes. And more than most likely, depending on how that goes in, what that more than most likely would impact is your landscaping plan. Because they may give you a very nice landscaping plan, and then these are very tight lots, tight in terms of narrow frontages and whatnot. If depending on where the service lines go in, they may have a whole host of landscaping and stuff that they can't put in now. They have to move it around or whatever. So, and there could be other things that are affected, but more than most likely, that's the one element of the design that would be affected by. Now, again, it's something where the applicant would have to make an application to the utility company. I'm sure there's fees that have to be paid and whatnot, because the electric company, the gas company does the layout and comes back to them with the layout, and they just incorporate it on the plan. They don't design it. I mean, they put a concept together of where they believe it would work. But than the utility company actually.
I seem to remember there was discussion along those lines.
So like the first one, can we put into the resolution a condition that when they do get the layout from the utility companies, that any changes to the landscaping plan has to be brought back?
Plan,
professionals?
period.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than most likely, it's gonna be on the
And,
plan.
and then right, and then the landscaping plan has to
Yeah.
be set. like-
This one is a little less, this is more a risk on the applicant's part.
Yeah.
Than it is on the board's part.
Yeah.
And it's unlike the stormwater, because under the stormwater, that's a DEP permit the borough holds and an obligation the borough has. Borough has no obligation to approve. We just need to know that where they're putting it in is, and it's a gas and electric company that does the installation.
But we can make that as a condition
Well, we
that
could-
our professional staff needs to
Yeah.
be okay, you, with any landscaping adjustments or site adjustments.
Just a question, when the gas and electric bills are drawn, can we assume that they'll be within the driveway? Or will they have to be in pervious areas?
That's kind of the catch-22 that we're dealing with here, because if we were to lay them out on the plans right now, the likelihood that the utility provider would look for something different is just as great as if we don't do anything and they come back. So the risk of changing a plan is there, but we do have the ability to push back on them and say, no, don't put it there, put it over here. The driveways aren't gonna be there. You know, when those plans are.
And for a little bit of further comfort, I guess. I interpreted our discussions in the October meeting as we would show all the existing utilities on the periphery roads that we're tying into. And we would not be showing the gas and electric within the site for that exact reason. No matter what I show, the gas and electric company are gonna do whatever they want anyway.
Right,
And-
and when we understand that, I think that the issue though is if we have some beautiful little landscape area that,
I went a little further and what I said, and what I put into a note about existing utilities, proposed utilities. Not only are they underground, but I put in some language on the plans that this is subject to the servicing utility design. The servicing utility design must respect the site plans and the landscaping plans. And if they try and put something in conflict with landscaping, for example, a transformer, then they have to get that approved by either myself or Mr. Clerico. And so that's another safety factor, if you will, that they can't,
you're like the only person I know who can tell a utility what to do.
well, we could try, but they're not gonna listen.
Exactly. So getting back to this then, and the condition would be that if they do accept some beautiful little landscape area, that our professionals need to be satisfied about where it's gonna be replaced.
And we have no problem with it.
Okay, fine, I'm okay with that then.
Sounds good. And everybody good with that on the, yeah, no question, thank you. All right, next one.
Fire official, item 32G. We had a report from the fire official. I'm not sure we had this report in hand when we did this on October 18th.
We did.
You know, okay, so we have a report dated September 17th with a number of comments. Some of the open issues that from what I read from the fire official's letter was the location of fire lane, parking restrictions. Were not shown on the plan as to where they were located. And again, the minutes of the board meeting said that those restrictions of any kind were gonna be included on the next set of plans, or next revised set of plans. Again, I'm deferring back to the board. Normally, this is something you get and when you're discussing the overall project. I think you want to hear officially back from the fire official as part of this, so you know where you're gonna designate the stuff. But again, your minutes say you were gonna get it before you start the hearing, so. Again, this was the board's condition, so the board should decide if you're okay with it.
With our minutes, like you said already, that our minutes, we didn't have that fire official report, did we, when we did this one?
What we said.
No, it's dated September, we didn't have
Said
that.
the applicant will work with the fire official and incorporate the restrictions on any, well, this is from the minutes, any quote, next revised set of.
Should we as a board, we've talked about doing this before, we haven't done it on many things, but should we have the fire official come give testimony to help us, or will that help, or make sure it's covered?
Wrote a letter.
The letter should be sufficient.
I mean, in most cases, the letters are usually sufficient, and usually the applicants have no problem incorporating the letters of
Right.
the fire officials. It's,
Do you feel that addresses the temporary waiver, things like that?
I think it's fine if they're agreeing to put all that stuff on the plan.
And we are
Everybody else?
agreeing to all of it, and we understand the only fire lane is gonna be at the Veterans House.
Everybody else okay with that too, or any queries?
Yeah, I think it's part of the hearing, you want to just get an update from the fire official.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
So you know exactly what they're talking about, and if they, in the course, you know, the course of the hearings here, and again, we're not gonna finish this tonight, but we get started, you can request the fire marshal to give an update.
That's kind of what I was
Yeah.
thinking, as part of the.
Yeah, I mean, we could bring the fire official, and we also could have the fire official update, issue another letter based on updated plans, and then. maybe
And the
ask for
only,
further update.
the only thing I'm seeing in here that wouldn't just be addressed by way of a will comply would be the turning radius for the truck.
Right.
So if there could be, at some point during the hearing, the truck shown on the plans, present that to him. then- correct.
plan already, Mr. Chapman
Yeah, so if we could get
You
that,
can tie that into Mr.
Correct,
Trackman's.
correct,
work.
everything else I
There
think is
so
covered by.
As far as the planning board monthly meetings, fire department has its monthly meeting and the fire marshal is here in the building, so if we can find out when that is. In December, it's not like asking him to come in, especially.
Yeah, I think for this size of application, I think we might like to do it. We're making new roads and. All right, Bob, item.
All right, the last one is, I'm gonna refer back. In reviewing the architectural plans, there was one set of drawings that didn't have, what was the requested information, bedroom breakdown and average size. I was just pointing it out, I think it was might have been the bedroom, something, I'm not sure, the Lafayette 101, whatever that is.
We looked into this, the information actually is there, but in your defense, it's very hard to find. I looked at the architectural plans for those, the townhomes. And the average size is listed in a tiny corner box on the front sheet as 1,940 square feet for each unit. Plus or minus, you can go, minus 17 or plus 33 square feet with some different options for bay and bow window type things.
Is this the sheet with the invisible ink?
Very later on in the plans, much later on.
And I only mentioned it because we didn't see it, and
Right. Is it on every architectural plan you said, or just a specific one? Can you quote it?
It's on the architectural plans prepared by, or for the townhomes. It's called the Lafayette model. And,
So it is on there, it was just hard to
yes,
find.
and there was a discrepancy or question. I originally was informed there were gonna be 55 2-bedrooms and 56 3-bedrooms. They're actually all going to be 3-bedrooms. There's a 2-bedroom option that they don't wanna exercise, so all the townhomes will be, although the market rate townhomes will be those,
So we're just
3-bedroom
writing
ones.
2-bedroom out.
And that changes the parking counts to exactly what you have in your letter later on, which we agree with and we still comply.
That's a lot. Let me go back to the original one.
On the condition regarding the additional affordable housing information, I'm comfortable with the application moving forward with that item being somewhat open, difficult to find, but and I say that because in my memo, I have a handful of additional questions regarding affordable housing. My recommendation is that series of questions just be answered in an updated submission in the future, and I think you can handle all. So for example, I'd ask for where are the locations of the affordable townhomes? I'd ask for verification of those requirements, which is part of what Bob is referencing. I think that an updated submission that identifies the location and just provides the area of the affordable units, the bedroom sizes, and all of those various items should be submitted throughout the course of this project, and so I would recommend.
I'm not trying
hold
to
this-
give architecture testimony, I'm just saying.
No,
I
know,
know,
I
and
might-
the only reason I asked the
Yeah.
question was if we have drawing numbers that we can reference in today, and we say it's drawing numbers, whatever it is. 6 to 22
I
or
have
something, right? Then we could put that in a minute to which drawings, is that effective? Yeah.
Yeah, I do wanna, but I have to say, my bigger point was, yes, to completeness on this item, but also just FYI, let's put our, dot our i's and cross our t's on the affordable housing information throughout the application.
Can I ask
Feel
you?
free to beat up with the architects.
But Ms. Bennett, just so I understand, because, you know, apparently we are not wrapping this application by any chance tonight.
Yeah.
And we will be coming back, we want to address your concerns, but, do they really need, I mean, it's in the plan that we have to disperse them throughout the community, and I think it's 25% is the maximum is what the plan says. Why are you looking for specifics now when we might have you know, again, we have a third-party partner, as you well know, who's gonna be building the townhomes. They could have a customer who says, I want this unit on this corner, and if we've now identified that to you ahead of time, then we would not be able to sell them that unit on that corner, when it would make just as much sense to put the affordable on the left side and allow the market rate customer to have their selection. So I understand that you need to know, but we are going to agree to comply with the plan and all COA regulations. I don't understand why I need to show you where they're going to be right now.
When would they otherwise be provided? Would it be a condition of approval? So, because it doesn't sound like it can be resolution compliance, right?
I'm just trying to maintain the greatest degree of flexibility, and I'm hearing you now, and I don't know that I know
Yeah.
when that could happen.
Maybe, I'm happy to think of alternative ways to get to.
All right, I'm gonna shut up now. We have a plan.
Great. Wow, did we ever hear that one? All right, so we're satisfied with what we're gonna go forward with on that. Okay. Is everybody else satisfied with that? Thank you. Is that all of the, so, do we have to deem it complete again?
So here's what we do. We do have to deem it complete again, and here's the action that I'm hearing the board would like to take. We are going to confirm that items V, 33G, and 33H have been provided. And we are going to waive items P and 23, 21 and 22, and 23G.
32G.
Sorry. Oh my, let's
Sorry.
take it in 32G. And the applicant is represented that they will get a revised letter during the hearing with regard to the fire department and approving that turning radius. We also discussed some conditions that would be imposed, that would satisfy the board's concerns and allow the board to waive those items for completeness purposes and proceed to the hearing.
Okay, so would anybody like to? make
So
a
moved,
motion?
so.
Thank you.
Second.
There we go. Alan, could we call the roll on that, please? As per whatever Cara said.
Mr. Coe?
Yes.
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Mayor Carroll?
Yes.
Councilwoman Passaro?
Yes.
Ms. Giffen?
Yes.
Ms. Weitzman?
Yes.
Ms. Swiggle?
Yes.
Mr. Eckel?
Yes.
Coe?
Yes.
All right, that being said, I'd like to open the public hearing for HBC Liberty Village Urban Renewal LLC, hashtag 2024-09 Liberty Village Outlet Mall. I'm not gonna read all what numbers out, they're all on the agenda. For preliminary and final major site plan and subdivision.
Okay.
So,
Before we start, I think there's two issues that we just want to address and put on the record for the board. There were some questions in the latest report that Bob has dated November 23rd. I'll ultimately mark all these as exhibits. But there was a question concerning the incorporation of lots 29 and 32 in the application. Bob, I'll let you identify what your questions are, but I think the applicant has a response to those questions that will address the issue.
Somewhere in my report, I won't know if you can find it right now.
Page 7.
There are, the application is defined by several properties, and I went through all this in my first part of my report about the subdivision of the properties and what's going on the various components of the property. Along Stangle Road, to the north of what is defined as the application property, I believe that's lot 29, there are some additional, I'm sorry, that's 32? That's good. There's some improvements that extend beyond the limit of the property. They go into the adjoining property. The applicant can speak to ownership, but they're listed in the adjoining owners list as under a different corporation than what this application, although I believe the applicant probably has controlling interest in that, but they're just It's a different piece of property. It's not a piece of property that's been defined. The improvements are not on a piece of property that are defined by this particular application. They're shown, the plan clearly shows the property line, and clearly shows the improvements go beyond the property line. And again, I'll defer back to Kara on this, but I believe that might go to issue of notice. Because notice, I understand, is given to what's defined as the property here, not the adjoining properties. Something a little, and what goes on to the north on lot 32, you said?
Yeah, 32.
32 north. What goes on to is relatively somewhat inconsequential, but nevertheless, it's improvements that go beyond the property. What's going on to the south on Stangle Road is actually a relocation of Stangle Road and a parking area. They're essentially taking what was now the alignment of Stangle Road and moving it over to align with the road alignment they have as part of their property and readjusting the parking. That's a little bit more substantial. Again, it's documented on the plan. We can see what it is, but it's on a piece of property that's not defined as part of this application is what's before you.
And I think it's also, I'm sorry, just as I look at the plan while you speak, I think it's also lot 72.01, which is to the east of lot 32.
Well, yeah, there's another question I raised in here about the status of Stangle Road. I believe from reviewing other applications that the Stangle Road actually has a dedicated public right of way. And according to the surveys that have been submitted as part of this application, it follows the alignment of Stangle Road right through this particular property. That's, if nothing else, a condition of any action the planning board would take is that if it hasn't been already taken care of in the developers or the redevelopers agreement, that the borough's gonna have to vacate rights in a public road to sue this property. And then the question is gonna be, are we asking them to reestablish those rights as part of where they're realigning Stangle Road through the property? So that's more of a not unimportant, not unconsequential issue, but something that's gonna have to get resolved. Right now, we're just talking about irrespective of right of way, irrespective of anything else, there's physically improvements that are required in order to approve the site plan that are on properties that are not part of the site.
And the reason we're bringing this up now before we start is we just want to make sure that notice was proper and that we did 200 feet around all of the properties that were incorporated into the application and that improvements are being constructed on.
That would cover these lots, the 200 would cover these.
Well, I'm gonna turn it over to.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background on the realignment of Stangle Road. We were asked to do that. Our original plan followed the original contours. We were asked to straighten it out, and we're happy to do that. The overlap onto lots 29 and 32 is really grading. It was
I'm sorry.
It's grading.
Grading.
So it's a holdover from an earlier plan. We are prepared to represent to the board that we will not be performing any work outside of a public right of way, lots 29 or 32. We can revise the design to eliminate the grading on those lots.
And just not to belabor the point, but this is actually it's a realignment. As you said, you're realigning Stangle Road. So it's not just grading. You're actually changing the alignment of the road. And grading is part of it, but you're actually realigning the road on the adjoining property.
I will, but we were talking about the work that's outside of the right of way on another person's property. And that's only limited to grading. So, you know, the Stangle Road realignment with the right of way.
But aren't you
Can I say something?
doing regrading as well as crosswalks and aren't there additionally sidewalk improvements as well? On the adjacent lot? To the north anyways?
What you were just, on the north end, what you were just speaking of is within, now, to go to Mr. Clerico's point two, Stangle Road is a mess. And it's a mess in terms of ownership, because only a portion of it is actually legally a right of way. A lot of it is still in easements that are right of way easements and the dedicated right of way and or easement. And what we want to do is clean this all up and actually make it a nice, clean, whether it's right of way, even however you would like it, we will certainly do it. But the road itself today does have that curve to the left and a T intersection to the right and another turn to the left. And that's where the legal description of the property is, and we're trying to straighten it out as per what was requested by the mayor and the advisory. committee.
Yeah,
And
here's
so-
the governing body requested it.
Okay, so we want to do exactly what you're asking, and to effectuate that, there are some easements that are on the property below that lot 29. A combination of right-of-way easements and two different right-of-way easements. One crazy 20-foot wide one that goes for nowhere. There's another sanitary sewer easement, so what we were saying was, yes, there's a realignment, but the realignment falls not on private property, but within easement area. So we felt that we would deal with the grading issue, we will certainly meet the grade at the edge of our property and not do any grading offsite. And that portion of realignment where it does start to left and we're tweaking it to the right to continue straight north would fall within the easement areas as we see them today. So that we're not working on private property, we're working within easement areas, which may or may not be considered rights of way, depending upon whether you read all of the deed book pages of all the easements that we have found going over Stangle Road, all the way from 12 up to beyond the 7201 between the brewery and the distillery. As to the north side, what Don just said was that we're gonna stay within the right of way, so we're not gonna do any work on the private property of lot 32, which I believe is the brewery property. We're only going to be staying from the brewery property's little curb cut where the parking is, south, and staying within the right of way there. No work, and as Beth just pointed out, there is a crosswalk, and that's within the right of way. And then there's a contour that parallels the right of way, that'll just be pulled within the right of way. So there's absolutely no work on 7201, which is the property of the distillery.
What do we need to do here?
I'm gonna defer to, I mean, all I can say is that from a public notice perspective, we need to notice within 200 feet of any property that's involved in the application itself. And if there's an easement on the adjacent property, then that would incorporate that lot into the application because there's work being performed within the easement area.
We
I
have a
don't
list, we have a
know
list of
from
the
a
notices
location.
given, don't we? We have a list of. what-
We do,
Okay.
we absolutely do.
Mm.
As far as the location of the work, I think Bob and Beth are gonna have to kind of opine as to that. I, once we figure out that that's accurate, then I can opine as to the notice required in the lots, but I think I need
So we-
to
We
understand if
kind
that's
of need
true.
to compare the notice maps, as it were, we lay the notices out on a map. What notices were given for what lots, and then where the work is, and make sure that there's no work outside of the notice map.
I think what we've identified as the potential 3 lots that weren't included, the 29, 32, and 7201. The explanations that they're not included for the reasons given, I think we need to evaluate.
Yes, I think I'm hearing that they said they were going to change the nature of the work, so they wouldn't provide the same level of work because of this.
Correct, that is exactly what I'm hearing. I did hear an easement reference, I just wanna make sure that there's no work in it. There's no work in an easement on one of those properties. That's the only other concern that I would.
I'm sure as part of the hearing process, we can straighten out where easements are and aren't, how they're gonna get relocated, how they're gonna be dedicated and whatnot. I think the discussion at the moment goes through notice, whether that's improvements on a property that was not incorporated as part of the application and the notice. It's relatively clear if you look at the subdivision plan as to where these existing things are. It's not at all clear when you look at this, the site plan, because the site plan just does, it shows physical stuff, it doesn't show the easements. And I can't sit here and dispute what the applicant's engineer just said. Looking on here, I see some easements that are in that, what they are, who has rights in them, when we're working with the easements that are already dedicated to the borough for road purposes. And they're just moving things around within those easements. Those are clearly easements that are on other properties, clearly easements that, well, they're being represented clearly as easements where the borough has certain rights, public access rights, probably ownership, probably maintenance, probably a whole lot of other stuff. And we're gonna have to deal with that as not only as what's off-site, but what they're proposing on-site. But that's something we're gonna do as part and parcel of the hearing. What we're really talking about is whether, refer back to Gary here, we have jurisdiction because of a notice issue. That's really, I guess, what we're talking about.
So I think I go back to my original question. Do you agree that they're, based upon the representations made, that there is no work being done on those properties that were not included in the application? Or any easements on those properties?
Well, there is work being done on those properties. Whether it falls within an existing easement or not, I can't tell.
Okay, so that's even, because what I had heard was what Chair had heard, which was that they were no longer going to be making improvements on those areas. So assuming that's the case, does that change your?
I would say that in the case of lot 29, that's somewhat impossible because they're moving Sangle Road. I mean, you're not gonna have Sangle Road end in the back of the townhouse, obviously.
Correct.
So there is some physical, the one up to the north on lot 31 or 32 or Sangle or 20, whatever lot it falls on, again, the lot lines are a little unclear in particular in here. And whether those are public, I believe those are actually public rights of way easements though. But they're on, other properties. So there's improvements going on, let's say to the north, there's some, maybe it's on lot 32 and maybe it's on lot 21, or maybe it's hard to tell where the lot lines are here. But they're adding some additional improvements and doing some grading of an existing road that, even though it's not clearly represented on the plan, I believe is actually in an easement that was dedicated to the borough. It's actually a borough road at that point. But it's on a different piece of property. The one to the south on 29 is much clearer. There's actually a public being represented as a public road, and it's being realigned. I mean, physically moved over.
A question, somebody mentioned the two, so properties were noticed and properties within 200 feet of those properties. So now, if so, we're worried about some plot was missed, but did you say that they were within that 200 feet? But my question is, if they should have been noticed, would the 200 feet have gone different?
Yes, so the way that the 200 feet notice is determined is you take all of the properties that are being subject to the application for improvement. And 200-foot radius is drawn around all of those properties. So even if there were improvements on one of these three lots that was included in the notice, the question we would need to see is if there are in fact improvements on those properties, did the 200 feet radius, is that drawn around those properties as well?
And the
Does that answer your question?
It does, and I think for the difficulty for people understanding what we're talking about, tell me if this is what we're talking about, is if we didn't notice the correct area properly, we cannot continue with the hearing until that's done.
That is correct,
Basically.
and that's what
That's what we're trying to make sure, because
Correct.
if we go ahead and it turns out that we did not notice correctly,
correct.
anything we do is null and void, we have to start again.
Correct, and that's why
So
we're
we
trying
wanna
to
make
determine
sure,
whether or
sounds
not,
really technical, but it could really throw it out for the applicant and for the town, right?
Yeah. and that's why we're trying to determine what lots are actually having improvements on them.
So-
We've got-
So let me ask the question about 7201, if I could. So, it looks as if 7201, which is because 7201 is a larger lot, what you're telling us is that if there's something that's happening at the south corner of 7201, the 200-foot buffer is 200 feet from the entirety of that parcel, right? So 7201 goes all the way north, 100 feet or to the other side of that building over there. So I think that the issue that that would, in my mind, indicate that if anything is happening on 7201, it's not gonna be captured by existing notice because it is so, it's at the extreme end of where the property is. 29 is different, I think, because of what we're, it's adjacent and there's an easement and it would have been captured by existing notice anyway. I think it's the north end stuff that we're running into the problem. 32 got noticed because of 31. Right? And then the north end of 32 isn't that far north to suggest that 21 wasn't also noticed, right? I think that that's probably okay. Yeah, I'm worried about 7201 because it's a long
Ms.
haul
Kaczynski,
lot.
Ms. Kaczynski, do you agree that you do not notice from public rights of way, even though the right of way crosses over lot 72.01? You do notice from offsite easements, but you do not notice from public right of way. Our work is within the public right of way.
That I would agree with.
Our work on 72.01 is within the
That I
public
would
right of
agree
way.
And I tend to think you're absolutely correct, except your plan says it's a private road. I think your plan is incorrect.
As I said, there's a lot of conflicting information regarding Stagno.
And I'm only saying that from recollection of it, reviewing.
Tax map doesn't show it.
Application for the approval. That's my recollection that that was.
So we feel we're properly noticed.
On that side, on the other side though, on the south side on lot.
2932 and 72.01.
And on lot 29 is where we're actually moving Stangle, whether Stangle Road's a private right of way or a public right of way. In that area, we're physically moving it over to on another portion of the property that doesn't contain the right.
There is
So it's
another,
not
there
covered
is
by
another,
that.
there is another 20-foot right of way over
For
there.
a sewer or something, yeah, again.
Does that
They're-
count?
They're both.
Right.
All three, actually.
So your testimony is that it's within a right of way, but it's an easement right of, it's a sewer easement right of way.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, actually.
Oh, okay.
I don't
That's
think it
what I'm
matters.
trying to
I mean, I get carried away, but I don't think it matters because it's, the borough has rights in that space. And the argument.
I'm piggybacking on your rights.
Right, the borough has rights for things to happen there, and so the notice issue is not a problem because you don't have to, as we just established, the notice for rights of way.
And our concern here is the noticing. I'm also hearing the things that the rights, we're going to reincorporate things like, that's something for the here and later, about reincorporating roads that have been realigned.
That's separate issue, this is just
Okay.
about notice.
Okay, I'm just, okay, making sure I know what we're,
Oh, no,
I'm gonna let them look. Make sure, because we're.
Well, the list does have to be certified by the tax assessor.
But he only certifies based on the lot and blocks that he's given.
Right.
So if
And if
29,
it's not
32
given,
and 7201 were not on the list, tax assessor would not be able to provide the correct.
But we're saying they're covered because they're within 200 feet of another lot.
I think that 32 is covered because
31.
because of 31 and the 200-foot would, I don't think we're gonna run into this problem on the 32. I think 7201 is the only
And that's
place.
also the right of way.
But that's a right, if the testimony
they're
is
both
all
within the
happening
right-of-way.
right away, then it doesn't change who needs to get noticed.
But they said they were going to change what they did to make sure it kept within a certain zone,
Well,
but I'm worried that we're going to change
But my point is,
That
we're
was-
going to make sure that we stay within the right of way.
All right. But
Right.
that's not gonna cause us a problem with grading or a crazy grade.
There's the fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a crazy grading in the past when the road had the curve and there were extra townhouses between the road and the tracks. The realignment that the mayor and the administration asked for, those townhouses have gone away, so the grading doesn't need to go that far.
Well, we want to let them know.
Seventh inning.
What?
Seventh inning.
You're not.
After the YMCA.
Not on camera.
Sorry, just give us.
That's all right,
Yeah.
please, I'd rather you, it needs to be done and it needs to be. Sure. Yes. We were going to, oh, I just left, they were. Can we take a 5-minute break? Please. We'll take a 5-minute break for the YMCA.
You have to sing it.
I don't have anything for a prize. Thank you very much. A lot of discussions happened in that break. I think we need to capture. We need to capture what was said or what we're doing. Can we, yeah, can you capture it for me, please?
Okay, so there's been some discussion as we heard with regard to, the potential for improvements, grading, relocation, let's just say work done in connection with the application on lots 29, 32, and 72.01. So out of an abundance of caution, the applicant, and correct me if I'm wrong, has represented that they will obtain a 200-foot list notice as necessary and revised from what they currently have that incorporates those 3 lots. The notice will be sent out with the next meeting date of December 10th. As the date, there will not, so everyone here and on Zoom, there will not be new notice to the people that have already been noticed that are here tonight. There will also not be new publication. There will just be notice to those additional property owners, if any, around those 3 lots. Meeting will be carried to December 10th, same time, same place. And like I said, no additional notice other than what's represented.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
That's my request.
Okay, thank you. And we will therefore put you on the agenda for December 10th. Thank you. I'll allow a few minutes if people want to leave before we move on the rest of our agenda.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Run fast, come on. Run fast.
December 10th, yes.
You just say that.
If anybody had like a question that I can resolve for you, so you know.
All right. Everyone's clear. Get ready for the long day. All right, I'm gonna move to chair items then as people are moving quite quietly. I'm thinking of the time. So the only item I've got on here, which is correct, is next meeting is December 10th. As noticed on the agenda, we already have completeness and public hearing for Huntingdon Tea House. That, if you remember, is an additional to the original site plan, so it should be quite quick. And then now we have a continuance of this meeting, assuming that the notices that might or might not be needed are done correctly, and then we will start the public hearing proper on that date. Okay. I don't have any other things in chair items for today. Does anybody have anything they want to raise?
Just a point of clarification, for item number 8, it said it continued from 10/22. 10/22 was canceled, the meeting, so does that just means that it seems to imply.
Continue it from that date, that was the original date, and they chose to continue it to this date to happen, wasn't it? That's the HCDC. They asked for it not to.
But the meeting was canceled, so there was no discussion on that day. I just wanted to clarify if it just simply means that it was continued from the agenda, or that it seemed to imply that we actually had discussion about that on the 22nd.
No.
The way that it
Well,
reads.
It was for the notice because and there was a notice put on, when that meeting was canceled, there was a notice put on the
Right.
website and on the door that meeting was going to be canceled. It was to preserve their notice of hearing.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Renotice for that.
All right, I understand now.
So no, there was no discussion. It's simple, similar to tonight, basically, there was no discussion, no public hearing was opened.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One quick thing on share, just, cause I forgot to write it down, I know we noticed this last year, what's the date of the reorg meeting?
Oh, no, we have the reorg meeting. It's the 14th. I just wanted to double check.
Thanks.
To make sure it's on our regular schedule of the second Tuesday.
Eileen pulled together a list of dates, which she's still getting checked from Carla, because council haven't done those yet.
Yeah.
And when we have that, we'll bring it to one of the next 2 meetings for discussion.
No.
When did they get adjourned?
End of the year.
End of the year?
I think so.
I can't, I'm glad you can remember.
I can look that up.
I cannot remember.
We haven't heard, did they pay weren't they missing? some
They are
escrow?
up to date on
They're up to
escrow.
date.
Now, there is a small balance of about, I would say about $800.
Okay.
It's not going to be much for, you know, if anybody.
Well, they'll have to replenish it.
Yes, they,
But we've had no correspondence. Right. Thank you for that update. Bills,
no bills.
I was hoping I didn't. So there were no bills, thank you. Do we need to go into executive session, Karen? Excellent. All right, so I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.